Right, we can start a little panel regarding GDPR, security officers, responsibilities, the impact on the companies, both local ones and international ones operating within European Union. And today with me, I have Holger Spohn, CI Security Supervisor at NATO. Yeah? Okay. I have Lars, Hilse, thought leader, security consultant to governments and economy. I have Intars, Garbovskis from Accenture Latvia. And I have Johan Rambi, corporate privacy and security advisor. So, gentlemen, let's start with a very simple question. Now, GDPR itself and its impact both on data protection and on the business. So what do you think? Is it on time? Is it okay? Is it too harsh? Is it not? How do you feel about GDPR? So who wants to go first? Well, the guys with the mic, right? Yeah, okay, Intars. So.
Yeah, I think most probably it's on time, but of course I think important thing is how companies and security people are really perceiving it. If it's just compliance, tick marks somewhere, or it's really something where we can take and move one step forward, really from business point of view, trying to protect our and also client data more.
Yeah, but then nevertheless, the business maybe will see that as an overhead, not as an opportunity. Do you see that as an overhead or more like an opportunity for businesses?
Definitely no, if you really look from the right angle on those things. If it's just being compliant with one more set of rules, then it's overhead. But of course, everything starts at the top of the company. If there is the right way of thinking, if they understand, then this is nothing bad to be implemented.
Yeah. Johan, the company you work in, I guess it has some like 6 million customers or something like that. So how does your company feels about GDPR?
Yeah, so first of all, for me the GDPR is a legal compromise of all lobbying that has been done in the past years. Yeah. And eventually, it is a result that for let's say, for amateur organizations, for the amateur level of usage of the personal data, it gives some pointers, but nothing more than that. It's too abstract. I think much more important, government and European government should take more leadership in this to create more guidelines and much more instruments to help implementing this. Yeah. Otherwise, it will just be a legal document where, indeed, compliancy will take the stand and will create the attention. And I think in that case, it will never solve the end goal. The end goal, which I think is all of these regulations, is to be more in control and to respect the rights of your citizens, and also to have a better risk management approach. And that's more business-wise. So in our company, we have put this into the enterprise risk management approach, where financial, operational, safety, whatever, all risk will be in the same way treated. And from the GDPR, it's much more important not to use always, because I was in a session previous to this one, they talk a lot about security measures. That's not the way to solve these matters, because if you want to solve this in the right way, you must follow the data itself and treat them, and you have to get data responsibility. And then also, one example, it can be an enabler if you take action on the data retention. Because if you store all those data, it costs a lot of money. It's bad for the data quality. But if you take it from the right angle, it can save you a lot of money if you make clear which data you need to use for that purpose and which not. so that the data responsible person can decide, okay, after that purpose, get rid of the data. It will avoid also all kinds of incidents which you need, which you want to protect in order to prevent. I don't think that is the right way. So you need to take action on the data. So also data governance is very important to implement in an organization. And we have done that, to follow the data and data streams. Also, because of the register, I didn't hear anything about create this register, Article 30 of the GDPR. That's a hell of a job. Create a list of all your processing of your personal data. No one have this whole configuration list of all the data. I don't think so, because you have structured data and unstructured data. It's so difficult to get that up on the surface.
Yeah, we mostly talk about structured one, especially within the companies, but the database of the customers, database of the prospects.
But the most incidents occur from unstructured data.
Okay, good one. Can you pass the microphone to Lars? Lars, you are consulting. How does GDPR looks from the consultant point of view? I mean,
well, it looks like a nightmare, to be perfectly honest. I think from a consulting perspective, what always arises in you is the consulting aspect, and I think the European Union has done a very poor job in actually creating a culture around it. It was very well said that it's a document, no more, no less. And I suggested earlier, hey, you know, what about we, as the European Union, also issue one central multilingual website where I can report a breach that has happened, where then, depending on industry and country and whatever, a representative gets back to me and says, look, you need to contact this department or these guys in order to take the edge off what has just happened. Nothing of that sort has happened. This document is heavily lobbied. I think since its inception, it's experienced over 3,000 changes, a lot of which were made by politicians who are usually like blind men speaking of color. And so you know where this exactly comes from. And the interest set aside, I think for this document to actually fly, it would require that something like this happen, that the EU really has a task force that creates a breach notification site, that every one of the 27 million businesses we have registered in Europe gets a letter through their chambers of commerce, you know, make them useful for once, and say, hey, look, you know, this is a 5-step plan, what you have to do when you have a breach. And, you know, of course, if a letter like that goes to I don't know, Mercedes-Benz or whatever, it'll go in the trash because they have their own department, but it would be very, very beneficial for the small and medium-sized companies who have no idea what this is about. I just gave a talk downstairs, and people were looking at me like, you know, hey, you're the savior, you're supposed to tell us about GDPR. And I'm like, yeah, but it's a culture thing. You know, you have to find the solutions for your company yourself. It can't be, you know, put upon you. So that being said, I think to boil it down, number one, yes, it's a good time. It's very necessary. Number two, I think the EU in particular, perhaps it's going to happen in national law later on, but you know, that being said, there can be a lot more done to actually make this culture rather than just a legal document where a lot of attorneys will benefit financially from.
Right, right. Okay, Holger, maybe the broader view, so you're not representing a company, a business, but somehow, you know, the rules apply to some other organizations as well. I'm sure NATO got it handled, but it's multinational organization. From that sense, it's like implementing something like that in a really global scale. So it's much bigger. Maybe you are looking at it in a different way.
We have, to a degree, we have it handled. Now we have 29 member nations, and you see with NATO HQ in Brussels, they have the difficult job of bringing the 29 nations together and to agree on one common standard and to, which is then translated into policy. And to maintain that policy, while the nations have to follow their own regulations, their own national interests, maybe economic interests, so there are a lot of different factors. And I think that's part of what protects at the moment the EU and the GDPR, because personally I believe it is too late. That should have come a long time ago when we saw the problem of data and data protection and privacy protection and all of this coming, and it was visible. For the defense is to harmonize this across the EU, I'm sure is difficult. We have the same struggle. Every time a fundamental policy review is happening in NATO, this is a huge undertaking. If we have more complex papers to write, it can take years. And as my colleague said, we have less lobbying, but we have, of course, different interest groups and different entities that need to be reflected, that need to be represented, that need to be respected. And yes, we have it figured out, but we spoke about earlier on the whole mess of what cyberspace has created. Definitions for cyberspace and for the whole cyber environment, we need to urgently figure that one out. And I mean, we is either the EU, NATO, or other international organizations, because the most critical start is that we all speak on the same subject and that we find one common ground. And without that, you will never find a common agreement because everybody understands something different.
Yeah.
Imagine invoking Article 5 on a cyber incident, and then you don't have a cyber incident defined. Then you're in a very bad fix to start with. So I think those are very important definitions, which also have to be made in other contexts.
Yeah, but in this case, Commission did something very interesting. If we maybe look at different regulars. It appoints actually the responsibilities. So I think this is one of the first regulars that very clearly says that you have to appoint a security data officer, the marketing is responsible for that, the company is held accountable and responsible for that, and that, for data breaches, etc. Prior to that, sometimes companies apologize publicly. So we have a data breach, we are very sorry, this can be affected, please do this and that. Sometimes they don't. And now it says very clearly. So our panel second part is about the responsibility. Is it equally distributed? Is it not too harsh? Is it so? Johan was talking about these tips and milestones regarding these regulations. What exactly to do? Give me the recipe of how to make this company compilable. But nevertheless, there's plenty of text in that regular, so you can squeeze something out. What should be done? So, what do you panelists think about the dispersion of this responsibility? Is it too harsh? Is it not too harsh? I mean, the fines we've been hearing will be tremendous in terms of a percentage of the turnover of the company, etc., for not reporting that.
Well, let's not let's not eat it hotter than it is. Essentially, the thing is, number one, the fines are up to. Mm-hmm. They're not generally just going to smash 4% of your annual turnover if you fail to report something. So a lot depends on the criticalness of the incident that has happened. And a lot of companies who are interested in maintaining their reputation will actually react in a positive way and try to turn it around. I've actually managed one of these incidents myself, where I put together a team of PR experts, most importantly those, and to set up a contact center and so on and so forth. So, there's a procedure that goes along with it, which in this EU GDPR 2018 is not defined, and that's where we again are at step one, where we say, hey, if you impose such a huge law upon corporations, you should also offer assistance in terms of getting things done. And that being said, it goes one step further to actually, to make it executable in a sense.
Okay, Johan?
Yeah, so I think that is a good idea, to the responsibility and put that real into the organization. It will enforce much more the attention. I even like the German, because the German law is much more strict about that, about the accountability, than this EU regulation. So when someone is accountable, he or she will then make it a personal matter, and then it will lead into things. I think the responsibility of the further implementation should be on the management team in the business itself.
Yep.
And the common mistake is that if you will appoint a DPO, then everyone will say, okay, he will take care of this. And that's the wrong idea. The DPO is not for that. The DPO is to make sure that those responsible persons will do the right things and have the right decisions. And then you have you can create a good governance structure that there will be checks and balances. And I do think, and I mentioned it also in my speech, is that the use of a privacy impact assessment in your organization in an early stage in your process will help eventually create the insight of the data, of the purpose, of the legitimate ground, etc., so that the responsible person, the data owner, we call that in our company, the data owner, will have the right decision on that. And that's where also DPO is in place to assist and support and give advice on that. And then it will create a good culture change, because that is, in the end, the most important thing if you put in those responsibilities.
Yeah, we will touch that in a minute.
Just one quick comment. Yeah, I think I agree as well that it's good that there is accountability, responsibility, but the challenge, I think, is it's not clear what is actually expected. Those rules you can interpret in many cases as you wish. So there is responsibility to the company, but there is too less guidance or really something practical. How to do that? What we really expect? There are statements like as appropriate or high risk. What it is for each company, the high risk means something different, I think.
Okay, I got it. Okay. So what do you feel if we now final part of our panel is actually how does regular and the responsibility, is it going to make those companies better in terms of how they treat the data, some sort of a standard? And will it affect international companies that operate within the EU? Because we all understand that, yes, the regular touches European registered entities like enterprises, companies that they've been registered in, but there are many US companies delivering their services in the EU, and we've been hearing about quite substantial fines to Facebook, to Google, to Microsoft regarding the monopoly and data. And so do we see that in a sense it will protect our citizens better, it will make those companies better, and eventually it will make even the foreign companies a little bit better on how the data is treated? So Johan told that at the end there is an essence. Why is it done? So will it make our enterprises better in that sense? You already told it's too late. So
interesting question, tricky question. I think we need to give it a little bit of time now and to let it run and to experience what it will do, because personal belief again, the tax regulations already show us that you could say the smart companies, they will find, or they found tax evasion measures. That's with registering in Ireland, for example, or you register your company where your legal framework is best, or where even a country undermines the EU regulations and offers to bring industry into its own country better conditions. Now, I think the same will happen with the GDPR. They will, of course, look for ways around it, ways for minimizing the damage to them. I believe at the beginning, like we have many other certification systems where a breach happens and then you wonder, okay, so now what? Now you acknowledge the breach and now something happens. Best example, Equifax. So many breaches have happened in the last 2 years. People listened to excuses. They got offered more online protection. So here's a year of free online protection, and here's a year of free online protection. And most often it hits some poor guys in the military or others who are constantly exposed And they wonder, now, has this made anything better, or has this improved the situation? For them, it didn't, because after a spill, as I said this morning, the data is out there. We know our adversaries. We know second and third level industry, the data brokers, they will exploit the information. It allows better targeting, better profiling, be it for commercial advertising or be it for your adversaries if you want to hurt either your enemy, or now be it for terrorists. The Islamic State profiled American soldier and made a kill list out of this. That's the modern environment we live in. And if you can go out to a data provider and you buy information and you have targeting and profiling, they don't care. There is no ethical boundary limiting them. So we will never be able to prevent a spill. I got that. But I hope the punishments will take effect, because that's the only way, I think, where companies will realize something needs to be done where it hurts them in their pocket.
Okay, good one, good one. Lars?
I think from a security perspective, it goes both ways. I mean, the profiling of the U.S. kill list was, similarly done from intelligence services done otherwise. So it goes both ways, and which Holger said it very good this morning. It's a two-edged sword. So in any case, I think the security aspect has to be solved once and for all in long term, because we're adding more and more critical infrastructure to actually our Internet of Things, for lack of better words, and nothing is really happening to protect this.
Right.
Still, you have your Windows XP computers running critical infrastructure even today, and even after it was announced that where support is being discontinued, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot happening. Now I got off track. What was the original question? Sorry.
Do you believe the companies will have a better data treatment, and the individuals will eventually gain something?
Well, again, yes and no. I think this EU GDPR 2018 will not translate into culture. Therefore, I think the companies will comply because of fear of penalties, not because there is an interest in developing a culture which inside a corporation will actually lead to people looking out for each other and being more careful. So still, you have to implement serious endpoint security solutions in order, for the secretary not to pick up the USB key left in her favorite color.
But I got your keywords. The companies will be more careful, and the people within that company will be more careful.
If you manage
their domain.
If you manage to develop culture around the whole thing, yes. I think just putting out a law and saying you will be steeply fined if you screw up, I don't think that's going to translate to culture. It's going to translate to fear, and that will, in essence, not have a good outcome, but more
I sincerely hope you're wrong, but it makes sense. Okay. Johan?
So just my 50 cents on this is that I foresee a huge increase of smart cities and smart societies where critical infrastructures will be connected to facilitate these communities in the future. And this train is already going, and it's going fast, and it's not stoppable. So also not by fear.
The legislation is never the first, so it was always like that.
It will be long way behind in the last wagon, So, we need to change this approach. We need to change this, and I still believe leadership is also very important in this, to change the culture, because I have small children. They are totally thinking differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the education or the raising them how to use this in a better way, in a way that can give them a better life, with all these adversaries in mind, because they will be aware of that. But still they go on. This train is not stoppable. So we need to change our approach on this. And still leadership again is very important.
Okay, thank you. Intars?
I think, yeah, just to add, in general, it should improve security or protection of data, but I can agree that there is yes and no. For some companies, it will be really kind of kick off or start of really starting to implement and build culture around that. Some will really treat that as kind of compliance, and people will be just really punished, or there will be just first to not comply with that. Mm-hmm. So there will be both scenarios, I think.
Yeah, I personally know of one company that's already spent half a year in preparing to be GDPR compliant, and well, I sincerely hope it's not just all paperwork. Right. Thank you, panelists. I would like to thank you for your time, and well, let's commence our conference.